I don't believe men were created to be pawns in someone else's game. I believe we were created to be steward kings. Men under authority, yes, but entrusted with real responsibility. Not perfect men, but disciplined ones. Men who rule themselves, serve God directly, and refuse to live in fear. This is king, not pawn. I think we're probably living in one of the most agitated generations in modern history. Everyone's outraged, everyone's anxious, everyone's reacting. You can feel it in the conversations you have day after day. You can see it online. And I think you can probably even sense it in yourself if you're being honest. And what I find strange about it, this, many men, they think that agitation equals strength. It doesn't. It equals instability. Now, peace is not passivity. When scripture lists peace as a fruit of the spirit, it does not mean avoidance, because peace is not apathy, it's not denial or weakness. It's not being passive in any way, shape, or form. Peace is ordered internal stability. It is calm authority under pressure. It's the ability to basically stand in a chaotic situation without absorbing it and being destabilized yourself. Think about it this way. Jesus, we all know he slept in the storm. There was this crazy moment in the gospel where the disciples were in a panic about this storm, okay? Like waves were crashing everywhere, and Jesus was just over there, you know, sleeping, wind raging, boat shaking, and all. Jesus was just sleeping. Now, he wasn't being careless, okay? He was not being detached. He was just literally unshaken. He was unfazed. And that's what peace is. And when he stands, he didn't panic, did he? He simply commanded, and albeit, he was probably a little bit annoyed because, he knows who he is and the disciples were supposed to know who he was. But he commands it nonetheless. And ultimately, the message here is that peace doesn't ignore chaos, it just governs it. And I know you've seen this a lot of times before. A tense situation will arise. Maybe it's at work, could be in a personal relationship, or maybe it's even just like online, social media, rage baiting, everything like that. Instead of stabilizing the room, a man escalates it. Okay, the tone will sharpen, his emotions will spike, his words start becoming reactive. And sure, in the moment, he feels powerful, but what's actually going on there is he's surrendering his control to circumstance, and that's not strength. That's volatility. And that's probably one of the reasons I think why lots of men are so restless today. They're overstimulated. There's constant news, constant commentary, constant outrage, and there is always constant comparison. There's just no silence for them. And without silence, there can't really be any peace, because an agitated mind doesn't actually hold the spirit all that well. Isaiah says, "You keep him in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on you because he trusts in you." That's Isaiah 26:3. Notice the order there, okay? Peace follows trust. If you don't trust God's sovereignty, you will try to control everything yourself. And men who try to control everything themselves become anxious, defensive, and angry. And that's why peace ultimately requires a form of surrender. And this is the part that men resist the most. You have to surrender what you cannot control. This isn't to say, give up responsibility. No, you still have responsibility. What I am telling you is to give up the control of the outcome. Okay, because you're responsible for your obedience. You're responsible for your discipline, the words that come out of your mouth, your stewardship. But what you are not responsible for as a man is global outcomes, other people's reactions, cultural shifts overnight. Confusing the two always destroys peace. That's why I think we've all seen this before. There's a kind of man who walks into a tense room, and all of a sudden, for no apparent reason, the temperature just lowers. He's not loud. He's just simply grounded. He's listening before he talks. He's responding instead of reacting. Key difference between those two words. He slows the whole rhythm of the moment down for everybody. And that kind of presence is rare. It's also very powerful. Now I want to say this too. Peace isn't necessarily the absence of conflict either. because biblical peace doesn't mean no conflict. It just simply means internal order during said conflict. Because as we know, Jesus, he confronted the Pharisees. He flipped the tables. He called out hypocrites wherever he saw them, and he was never frantic, uh, never emotionally hijacked, I guess you could say. And he was acting from authority instead of agitation. And this is where we have to be careful because agitation is contagious. Outrage, it spreads quickly. It's faster than COVID, right? Anxious men, they create anxious environments. Angry men, they'll create defensive households, and unstable leaders, well, they create unstable communities, right? The good news, though, is that peace spreads too. It just spreads a little slower because it requires maturity. And this is where we need to talk about peace and discipline because the two go hand in hand. You cannot cultivate peace when there is chaos running amok. If your life is disordered, if it's overstimulated, if it's just indulgent, you're just staying in things too long, that is being undisciplined, and your mind will reflect that. Peace ultimately grows in structure. This is early mornings, time in scripture. This is guarded media intake, okay? Like, how long are you on social media? Are you getting caught doom scrolling? This is measured speech. Are you saying things that bring things forward and progress, or are you saying things that are going to cause people to go backwards? Are you tearing down? Peace is not accidental, okay? It's cultivated. And this is exactly why the enemy attacks peace, because a peaceful man, he cannot be easily manipulated. He doesn't react to every headline. He doesn't chase every single rage bait thing he sees on the news. He doesn't fear every shift that happens in the culture that is constantly thriving on shifts. Culture, it constantly provokes us. If it can keep you agitated, it's going to keep you predictable. Peace, despite everything that culture says, is actually what makes you free. And there's a moment that every man faces in his life where, you are going to read something that is inflammatory. Your first instinct is going to be to respond immediately, to argue or to correct, to escalate the situation. But then in that moment, that same man, he's going to think to himself, and he's going to pause. He's going to close the app. He's going to pray instead. He's going to return to his work. That small decision right there, that is strength. Peace ultimately protects leadership. A man who cannot be at peace with himself, he cannot lead others, okay? Because he will overcorrect, he will overreact, he'll overcompensate. A peaceful man makes decisions slowly and thoughtfully because he's not rushed by pressure and he's not baited by insult. And he's definitely not controlled by any fear. It's that kind of steadiness that ultimately builds trust in the people around him. And let's be clear, peace doesn't mean tolerating evil. Far from it. It means confronting evil without becoming it. I think of Batman, right? Batman, when he in comics, movies, TV shows, his biggest thing is not killing, because if you kill, then you're no better than one of them. Basically, that's the concept that I'm going for here. You cannot be just like them. You have to be different. You have to confront it without collapsing into it yourself. This means you can speak firmly, you can set boundaries, you can defend truth, all without losing your internal stability. And that is what Christ-like peace is. It's the source of real peace. Jesus said himself, "Peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you, not as the world gives to you, do I give to you," John 14:7. All the world does is it gives you distraction. Christ gives you anchoring. The world gives you escape. Christ gives you grounding. The world will be all sorts of noisy. Christ will give you a quiet strength. So if you're constantly agitated, something is misaligned there. I urge you to return to discipline, return to silence, return to trust. Peace is not weakness. It is controlled strength. It is confidence in God's sovereignty. It's the ability to stay stable when the world shakes. Do not let culture dictate your emotional state. stand steady, and become the kind of man whose presence brings order instead of adding to chaos.